applause for both as they come to the stage.
Morning. One's like SEO. Did everybody get caffeine in them? Because SEO isn't exactly the most exciting topic in the world. I'm gonna move my chair a little bit so we can hang out. So has everybody noticed a little change in Google over the last week or so? You noticed some overviews?
How many of you guys got a massive loss in traffic? All right.
So Nick, let's start with the first question, since everyone's a little bit kind of uncertain about what all this change is, and let's see how many people here have been paying attention. I'm gonna put the BCGs on. Anybody heard that term before? In the military, we call them birth control glasses. So I can. So have you looked to see where your business is listed in Google Search Generative Experience? That means basically when you perform a search and you see those AI overviews, have you looked to see where your products and services are? Now this means not putting in your company name, but putting in what you offer, what services you offer, where you offer them, to see what shows up. We've got 30. I don't know how many people are left in the audience, so. All right. Well, that's a good place to start. So you know about as much as we know right now with what's happening with these AI overviews, because nobody knows yet. It's so new, but it is scary, because what if Google's stealing our traffic? What if we spend thousands of dollars to create an article about something in our industry? Instead of getting the click to our website, Google just spits out that information right into the search results, and now we've got 0 clicks. And that's a big concern for a lot of people. Jeremy, have you seen this with your clients so far in terms of panic or worry or concern?
Definitely, but so much so to the fact where I'm seeing something that I haven't seen in years. And this is the PR crisis that Google's facing right now.
Yeah.
It's gotten so bad that people outside the SEO industry are talking about the absolute chaos that's going on. How all of these sites have lost traffic for essentially no reason. So the panic is definitely there within the industry, but it's much broader at this point, which is something that, like I said, I've not seen happen in years. We've got people who are now talking about replacing their default browser. We've got people who are now switching out what engines they're searching with, all of these things. So it's definitely changing the landscape in a huge way.
I have to agree with that. And it's funny, I was just talking about something on Facebook. One of our peers, Alan did a post and he said, what was it? Take a look at how many people are searching for how to opt out of the Google AI overviews. And the next query was really interesting because we found out, and I think I took a screenshot of it, we found out that when he asked about American singers who debuted in 1976, that according to the AI results, Paul McCartney, Rod Stewart, Elton John, Paul Simon, and Thin Lizzy are all American singers who debuted in 1976. So our confidence, I think, in what's has been rolled out maybe prematurely, is something that I don't think needs to have a huge concern, especially because while we're talking about ovens and we were talking about printers, I did a few searches using the new Google, and I said basically, tell me about or help me find a printer with Wi-Fi, help me find an oven with Wi-Fi, and none of that generative search result stuff came up. Transactional queries aren't affected. The traffic you're going to get for keywords that are around people looking to buy, purchase, and order likely aren't going to be affected. Are you saying the same thing, or are you seeing something different?
So I haven't looked too much at that side of things yet. So I don't really have much of an answer on that particular.
It's only a week new. Actually, less than a week. Next thing we kind of talked about a little bit before the event was the different people that are affected by this. And you'd mentioned businesses like our clients,
Sure.
or GEs or Lexmark, sorry. The consumer and what the consumer sees, and then third, of course, what SEO specialists are saying. So these are the three kind of areas you mentioned where there's an impact.
Yeah.
And what we'll do is we'll kind of break down some of those and talk about what's involved with each of those different groups. And first, we think about technology. What's the impact from a technology standpoint as you see it, thinking about all three of those different affected entities?
Well, from a technology aspect, the first thing I see is, first of all, everything is device agnostic, right? You and I have talked about this, the old 10 blue links, which, is anyone else here familiar with the term 10 blue links? No? Okay. So basically, this is the old school SEO approach where you've got the search results, you've got your 10 results, and then of course it's paginated pages, right? That's not really the case anymore. That's not what search looks like. It doesn't matter whether you're on your phone, you're on a tablet or a computer. It doesn't matter whether you're here or in Kentucky or wherever you are. Like, none of that matters anymore. It's this more holistic situation. But then the other aspect is the technology. You've talked a lot about voice search. You've talked a lot about the image search. That's another area that a lot of people aren't touching, but that's now a huge component of SEO. Do you want to talk about that for a minute?
Of course, yeah. And I know there's several different areas. From a business standpoint, they need to be concerned about where the technologies are that the consumers are going to be searching on. Like you mentioned, it's not just blue links and black text in a Google web search anymore. In fact, if you look at last year's results and you compare it to the search appearance today, you're going to see a completely different search appearance. Not just those generative AI search results, but you're actually going to see images and videos and now forums. Like, I've seen Reddit, I think they took a 300% increase in traffic just over the last few months as Google's injected in more kind of real-time content. I think they're calling it or relating it to their expertise and authority trust signals, where they think if consumers are talking about something today, it's more relevant than older content that used to be in the search results. So the appearance of search and why you've probably seen your rankings shift and change isn't necessarily because your rankings changed, it's because the results themselves are so different and so fast. So yeah, from a technology standpoint for businesses, that is something to think about. For the SEO specialists, now it's diversifying how we're optimizing across all those different things. It's finally the time to stop worrying about our listing in Google as a page listing and start thinking about the different ways we can appear in Google Images, in video search, in TikTok, and other different destinations, which we'll talk about when we get into multi-channel. But I think that's something I think the SEO specialists need to start accounting for. And I would go back as business owners or managers and just ask the digital marketing team, hey, we hear Google's shifting a lot. How are we addressing all the different types of ways that people are going to search in Google and the type of content they're going to find? And I think the last one is really for the consumer, and that comes into what you're going to do and how you're going to respond as consumers when this kind of stuff comes up. Are you going to be the one searching, how do I opt out of this BS, right? Or are you going to start maybe flipping over to Google Discover a little bit more, maybe going into TikTok and searching for things a little bit more, maybe using YouTube and looking at shorts and starting to get fed the types of content that you might not actually do a query for, but might have an interest in based on the affinity that you've developed and how you choose what you see in those different places. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, I think, in a minute, but I feel like that's from a consumer standpoint, that's going to shift the way that we use search. And Google is already pushing all this new stuff. You're going to see videos and commercials and Gemini everywhere. You're going to see the AI overviews in those commercials. So keep your eyes open for that, I think, as search continues to evolve with all this new AI. Next one was content. We're talking about content and how our content changes. Should we stop writing all this great upper funnel skyscraper content now that Google's just throwing content in the results?
So that's an area that I've been torn on for a while, right? Because we need to create the content to engage with our audience. So you have to create it no matter what. The question is, do we continue allowing Google access to it, right? So if we want to show up in the search results, then the answer is yes. But the other side of that problem is, are they going to take it and basically spin it? Are you guys familiar with the term spinning as it relates to SEO? Okay, some of you are. For those of you who aren't, basically it's a process where they take content and they spin it into, there's essentially these things that will swap out words for other words, and they spin this into a lot of additional content. And so basically that's what Google is doing, is they're taking your content and they're spinning it into their own AI answers, and quite poorly, I might add. So the question comes down to, do you want to feed their AI? Do you want to give them further ability to cut you out of the equation? And I haven't found a good answer to that yet. I'm curious your thoughts, because right now Google is still the dominant force when it comes to search, right? It's what, 92%, I think, of the search.
Depending on the query, yeah, for sure. I think the lawsuits from the publishers kind of tell its own story. There's a lot of publishers who are really ticked off that they used to get a lot of click traffic, and now thanks to the zero-click AI overviews, they're losing out on a lot of that traffic. So I think there's that angle of it. I also think that it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for those folks to take advantage of the fear that their competitors have. Competitors right now are already going into more of a multi-channel approach, which we should do as well. But they're starting to say, I don't care about Google as much anymore. They're frustrating me. They're ripping us off. Let's just keep our paid ads going in there and focus our efforts in other places. Well, the reality is those AI overviews still do have a way for us to click, and they still have a way for us to build brand awareness, and they still have a way for us to develop authority as a brand. So more than ever, now is the time to continue with a really strong content strategy. I think you heard about GE pushing content around recipes and staying relevant with seasonality. That's something that shouldn't change. You should still put that kind of stuff into your marketing calendar. And when I think about what we deliver to our clients, and so we didn't do much of an intro because we have so much to talk about, but I work with clients such as IHOP and Dr. Bronner's, and we'll put together a full content recommendation. And 10 years ago, that content recommendation was very keyword heavy. Now it's not. Now it goes back to the things we were talking about in 2019, where we were just talking about sort of ideas and concepts to test. It was, we called it VRUM, right? Which is voice readiness, mobile, markup, and measurement. And these were the things we were trying to get our clients to focus on. But we were a little bit ahead of what they had available from a resource standpoint to do anything with. So now we take these content recs, and yes, there's still an optimized title and description. There's still going to be headings and subheadings, and we're still going to have really optimized URLs and file names and alt tags and internal links and so forth, standard SEO best practices. But we're also now going to incorporate structured markup so that Google and other search engines can read and understand the meanings of words that we use on our page. We're going to include FAQs on every single page, not just because we want customers to find the answers they might have while they're reading our page, but because those answers are often the featured snippet you would see, and now the generative search result that you might see in many cases. So we've seen that same snippet be in the generative search results at the top, and giving you basically twice as much real estate. So structured markup, FAQs, these are all things we should go back to our teams with and say, are we doing this for every single page? Well, where do we get all the keywords? How do we build our content roadmap as we're talking about content? First place to start with the sales team, I think, right? And ask them questions about what do our customers ask for? Ask the customer service department. What are the questions our customers have? Go out to answerthepublic.com, where they'll give you a whole bunch of questions. And now my favorite is Gemini. I'll go out to Gemini or ChatGPT and I'll say, what are some questions somebody might have about this particular product or service? Now I've got a data-driven approach that's augmented with some insights from AI that I could use to apply to a page to give me more FAQs and more content and more individual content to help me rank better in search. What do you think on the content side of things? Do you think that's kind of where businesses need to consider, where the future is and how they should continue to address it? Or do you think just kill it?
No, I definitely don't think kill it. Like I said, content, you're always going to need this. That's just part of the buyer's journey, right? You're going to have to educate your consumer. You're going to have to teach them not only what you guys do and how you do it, but also how the industry works as a whole. So content is never going away. And I love your approach. I love how you're focused on multi-format, right? It's not just, hey, here's these textual articles. It's here's audio, here's images, here's video, here's all these things. But this does dovetail into the bigger issue, and you and I have talked about kind of a couple components of this. The multi-channel aspect, and then which is connected to the not being overly reliant on any single channel. So I don't know if any of you guys have been in a situation like that where most of your leads are coming from one source, but as someone who's done that before, I can tell you it can absolutely devastate a business. And when you have Google a company like Google, and this is not Google specific, right? We've seen these kind of issues with Facebook and other companies as well, where your once dominant source of leads dries up overnight, and now you're screwed, right? So we need to be doing all of these things, and like Steve's saying, the different types of content, but then also using that to engage with our audience in other ways. So not just through search or not just through social media, but we start to leverage this multi-channel presence where we're putting our information out in front of people constantly, very repetitively, in a way that they start to recognize and trust that brand. And that's where you start to see game-changing opportunities come up.
I agree, and I think the third part of putting together, a strong SEO plan is we're looking at the aspects of search, right? And it's, of course, tech. Google can't crawl and index our website. We're not going to rank content so that we have something that someone can find when they're performing a search. And then thirdly, of course, them interacting with our content in search results. And this goes back to the court case that Google had recently, where they finally admitted using user signals as part of the ranking system. So no matter how great your content is, no matter how many links you're earning to your website, if nobody's clicking on your result because you haven't taken time to really solve for the intent of the person who's performing the search, no one's going to click your listing. And if no one clicks your listing, then Google's going to naturally assume, and Bing, going to naturally assume that you weren't very helpful, and you'll start to demote yourself. So thinking about those three aspects, we get into that last part of links. We'll get to questions, I promise. As we think about links and AI, and we'll talk a little bit more about large language models and generative AI in a sec, but thinking about the way that Google's changing how they're performing or giving search results, how important are links going to be? Are links dead? Are they still part of the algorithm? In your opinion, what do you think? What are you seeing?
So, links are always going to be valuable, right? We've heard the mantra for God knows how long. Don't do something just because of search, right? Don't use these tactics just to rank in a search engine. And
So should I cancel the links I just ordered on Fiverr?
no, double.
Okay, great.
So the problem is a lot of the things that you would normally do, even if search engines did not exist, Google will penalize you for. So if Google didn't exist, how many of you guys would want links from other websites pointing to your website? Show of hands. Okay, right? No shit. But Google doesn't get this, right? So they want you to do things their way, but then they also give you this advice that is not honest, right? So I think links are still incredibly valuable. In fact, you and I talked about the experiment that I did a few years ago, where Google was adamant that we can identify bad links. If it's spam, if it's manipulative links, if it's, if somebody's trying to game the system, we can identify it and we can ignore them. And this was post Penguin, the update where they went after links a while back. And so somebody had screwed me over, stiffed me on a 5-figure bill. So I figured, well, hey, this is a good opportunity to conduct a little experiment here. So we threw about 250,000 spam links at their website. And the intent was, well, this should get them banned in Google. Guess what? Didn't happen. Their traffic quadrupled. And this was pure garbage. It was blog comment links, forum links, like everything that Google complains about. Every red flag was there. We built 250,000 links in the span of, I think it was 5 days. All exact match anchor text, all pointing directly to the homepage or one of their key service pages. By all merits, that should have tanked the website, but it didn't. So Google's going to tell you one thing. They're going to tell you you don't need links, or that you do, but you can't do anything to earn them, or otherwise you get penalized. The reality is links do matter. They always will matter. And that's from a user perspective just as much as a search perspective.
That's awesome. I'm seeing the same thing, by the way. One of our clients does a Veterans Day special that I take a lot of pride in working with every year to see if I can get us to the first page for free meals on Veterans Day and Veterans Day free meals. And it's exciting to watch every year to see if I can move up from 5 to 4 to 3 every year. And that page alone has earned over 5,000 links to it, some from government websites and the VA, and it's an exciting way to not just attract links, but also do something for the community. So as you're thinking about how do I earn links, what's my link building, link bait strategy, figure out ways that you can make a difference and do something positive when you do it. And if you want ideas, you're in a room full of people here that love to innovate. So I would make sure you get everyone's name and say, hey, I'd love to get 1 or 3 ideas from you about a page I can create on my website related to my business that could attract or garner links without having to do a lot of outreach. So yeah, I agree. I think, and Google's made a big point of this. They have to crawl through the web to find your content. So why wouldn't links continue to still matter? I think that's really important. One other thing I think that's important to talk about is the fear of the unknown. I don't know that everybody in the room has spent a lot of time really looking at large language models in general and how they're going to benefit or affect us. And the generative AI and the difference between the two, to be able to explain it to stakeholders, to build a business case to actually get that work done. Which, Nick, that brings us to the next question, if you want to bring that one up. So in this one, how comfortable are you explaining the difference between large language models and generative AI to key stakeholders in your business? I love that. What are those? And this is important because this is the new world. This is the new normal. It's there in everything we do now. AI is part of Google's core products. They're adding it to everything they're doing. It's super important to be able to at least understand the difference between the two.
So I'm going to throw a question at you on that. So I know you've been dealing with a lot of these LLMs. What thoughts do you have about getting the exposure that those potentially can create without having your information, your data, your IP basically stolen?
Yeah, that's a tough one, and this brings to the idea of, hey, should we ban Google from hitting our website? And I would never do that in a million years ever, because we know when we look at our analytics, most of our traffic comes from Google. So we don't want to get rid of that by any means, or throw the baby out, as they say, right? I think there's a huge advantage, and since we're done with this piece of it, let's just really quickly break out the two, right? Large language models, in a nutshell, are the learning systems that basically are fed a lot of different documents to study, learn, and try to understand. The generative AI is where the action takes place. That's where you actually create something, create code, create an image, create video now, which is amazing. It's where the actions happen. So the large language model learns and the generative AI creates. So that's the very simple way to articulate that to teams as you're working through, again, building that business case. So the way I would approach it is I would spend a little bit of time studying all of the different language models that are available, get into and play with Claude, get into play with Perplexity, get into and play with Gemini and ChatGPT. The latest and greatest just came out like a week ago, and it's phenomenal. It's neat watching the video of two AIs talking to each other. How it applies to SEO, as we think about it, I already mentioned a way that you can get FAQs from it, but you can actually build your entire content strategy from it. As an adjunct professor at UC San Diego and Cal State Fullerton, I'm constantly going through and asking every quarter, every term, about the syllabus suggestions. Give me a syllabus for a class around SEO strategy. And then I match it up to my syllabus and see if there's any gaps. It's funny to watch the seasonality when teachers start to use the ChatGPT before summer, and then summer comes in and the usage goes way down. It's kind of fun to watch. But I would play with all those different tools, and if you're doing any sort of testing, you can just basically ask all of them and see the kind of different answers that you get, and then see how you can apply that to your business. I know we're getting close to the end. Let's talk about that multi-channel approach. I think that's really important because as search evolves, we're not going to be, I think I was at an Amazon conference and they were talking about the vision that we're going to untether ourselves from our phones one day, and that we're going to be using AR, VR, and other types of equipment to use voice queries. So we're basically using our wearables and all the new devices that are coming out to say something like, hey, I'm pretty hungry. Can you help me find the best non-chain pizza place near me that's open right now? Yes, I found 3 places. Great. Can you use my delivery service providers and order me that pizza? Perfect, thank you. It'll be there 30 minutes? Great. Done. You never had to touch your phone. You never had to use a keyboard. You were able to interact and get what you needed using longer searches that are more conversational as opposed to those short keywords we used to use. So I think as it evolves, it's going to be more than Google, of course, but it's also going to be us thinking about how we can serve our customers without them ever having to touch their phones. So going beyond just the Google piece of it, where else should advertisers and businesses be focusing their search marketing efforts?
Well, when we talk about search, I think it's important to point out, so we talked about how the 10 blue links is no longer a thing. But the other side of it is people aren't just going to Google even when they want to search anymore. There was some data I came across recently where the younger generation, Gen Alpha, I'm sorry, was actually doing more searches on TikTok than they were doing on Google. So that's completely transforming the face of search. It's not just how the results are displayed, it's where they're even taking place. So we need to be where the people are. So, all of these social media platforms are incredibly important. These answer sites are important as well, right? It's not just, getting your own listing showing up in search, but if you're answering things on Quora, you're answering things on Reddit, Answer the Public is another tool you had mentioned. It's got a lot of information. But there's a lot of places where you can be out there answering these questions that people have, and that will give you visibility. Obviously, you're going to have to create a profile that's going to be connected to you. It's going to be branded to you in some way. But it's so much more than just the search engine. It's not just getting your website right. It's where do you show up when people search for you, your company, or things related to what you do. And that's the different approach we have to look at it from. It's a completely different perspective as far as where it's taking place.
Great. And to wrap it up, I think one action item to take from just thinking about the future of search, the multi-channel approach, is just get a spreadsheet together and create a column for each of the different places that we know our consumers are going to search. And if you're not sure, you can ask your peers, you can ask an SEO consultant, give me some ideas of where I should focus my efforts, get a column for each of them, and then go to an expert in each of those different publishers and ask, hey, how am I performing? How's my brand performing in terms of maximizing our visibility for our target audience in these different platforms? Maybe get a 1 to 10 score, and then just every year keep working as a KPI, to improve that number until you hit 10 out of 10. I think that would be a really easy, actionable item that you could do. Just take that spreadsheet, a column for each of those different publishers, and ask an expert in each of them, how am I performing on a scale from 1 to 10? Yeah, it's gonna be some audit costs and whatever to it, but I guarantee it'll be worth your time, and you'll have planned way ahead. In a year from now, when your competitors are trying to figure out where they're gonna get traffic from, you've already spread your stuff across the board. So
I love that. That's great advice.
any real quick questions from, I know you had one back from the back.
Yeah, I was, there's like you're not necessarily going to get them to come to your website, but you want to be shown in the actual model, right? So you want the data to show up. So if you tracked from the beginning models to today, there's been 3, 3.5, turbo, 4 turbo, now 4.0. Have they had a way where have you been able to track that to see if you've been able to actually influence so the model actually changes its view on you based on your content strategy yet?
Sure. So you could probably create a GPT to do a little bit of that, but I think measuring is going to be one of the biggest challenges. In fact, we were just looking at it right before we came up. Google had already said that they're not interested in expediting any sort of analytics in their search console around AI results. You can see Google Discover, and you can see a lot of really interesting information in Google Search Console that doesn't necessarily carry over to Google Analytics, but I think it's up to you and the web analytics team to sit down and figure out how can we measure all of this? What are the tools and the plugins that we can use and extensions through Looker Studio to be able to track and measure our performance? Of course, there's always the gut check. You can just perform some searches every day, or again, create a GPT and just kind of see where you're at. And of course, it'd have to be void of your personalization. So you have to refresh your personalization to do it. But I think that would be a way, if you wanted to see kind of where your presence is. You could do that the manual way. You can create some tools to do that. But ultimately, we got to figure out how to port as much as we can into Looker Studio. And some of it we're just not going to be able to. If you don't already have Google Discover and TikTok on your SEO task list or initiatives, that needs to happen. The challenge is, again, how do we measure it? And right now, you're just going to have to take sort of correlation metrics because we don't have causation data to be able to carry that over. That's a great question.
I'll give you a couple of quick tips on that. We track kind of similar situations when it comes to public relations, where you don't have a direct ability to track something. So some of the things that we look at in those cases, we'll look at, are you familiar with Google Trends? Okay, so go look at your personal name, go look at your business brand name, all of that in Google Trends, and you'll see that relative interest in that as a keyword phrase, right? So that's something you can look at. If you start showing up in these AI models, then you start seeing an increase in search volume for your name, for your company name, then that can be a good indicator that the efforts are having an effect, right? You can also look at the kind of questions people are asking you on social media, right? Are these the kind of questions that you typically get, or are these new questions that they're seeing as a result of something that you mentioned that ended up in one of these models? So you start looking at some of these outlying aspects, and you can start tying that to this. It's never going to be a one-to-one, but it does give you a little bit more data point, some more data points that you can work with.
I know I see my peers in Google Discover all the time, and I'm like, man, I need to start creating more content. You know, not just because people are going to search for me, but because if they have an affinity or interest in what I'm doing, they're going to see my content in their stream more often. So I need to make that happen and create a calendar to, again, to address that for sure. It's a question.
Recently, Google completely killed their team and product for podcasts and the discovery platform for that, and transitioned podcasts to YouTube now. And it's funny, y'all have mentioned a lot of different channels. I didn't hear podcasts, even though that's like the theme now. It's the commodity channel versus blogs. Where do y'all think things are going with that, and how does that affect generative search moving forward?
I can take that one to start, for sure. And by the way, using podcasts as a way to earn links is fantastic. I used a group called Interview Connections. And I said, hey, set me up with podcasts on other people's podcasts for the next year in the area of digital marketing and entrepreneurship. And I was able to get on some really fun ones. Just Google my name and the word podcast if you want to see what those podcasts look like and see some of the links that we earned. I do agree that a lot of the way that people are consuming content is in shorter spurts. So if you are doing anything with podcasting, which of course is now on YouTube, a couple things that I would focus on first is your keyword research around the topics of what that podcast is going to be to see if it aligns with the search terms you want to be found for. And then the second part of that is keep it short. We used to do these hour-long interviews with each other, and that's just not the way consumers want to see content now. They want it super short and sweet, and the AI is going to summarize all the audio and video for the person who's interested in it now. So you've got to think about a little bit of the context, because a lot of it will be transcribed in text that can be used toward your SEO efforts. So I'd agree, if you're going to use podcasts as part of your holistic marketing strategy, let's make sure, one, that we've thought about the keywords in our content roadmap of what we're going to publish. Let's keep it short and sweet, and let's look at our distribution points of where that podcast content's going to go. Is it going to go to Shorts, to TikTok, to Instagram Reels? Let's look at that whole gamut of where we can share that content and how much of it we need to share across each channel. And if you're going to do this podcasting as a way to generate more business, really make sure that you've included collaboration with other influencers and other podcasters, because you're going to kind of feed off each other's growth and grow each other's following by doing that. Don't just kind of make it about us. So,
okay, I think we're getting the thumbs up that it's about time
get
to wrap
off
here.
the stage.
I think we should see if he can push us off.